The creaking of wood splintering was not precisely the morning music a fellow would prefer. But there it was once more, my ranch gate creaking like a tired old warrior as Karen's gleaming white SUV plowed directly through it as if she were the owner. To her, my property wasn't land. It was a cut-through. No wave, no excuse, just sunglasses, smirk, and sense of ownership. The first time, I assumed it was an accident. The second, I recognized she was challenging me. By the third, I figured she was taunting me. And I'm not that kind of man to back down from a challenge, particularly not on my own property. Karen had no idea that while she practiced HOA royalty, I was constructing a sting she'd never anticipate. Before we go further, leave a comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? I used to imagine peace when I purchased this ranch. Open skies, cows grazing at sunrise, a wooden gate that would close with a satisfying sound every evening. After 3 decades building things, dust in my lungs, supervisors breathing down my neck, and HOA inspectors informing me what color my mailbox must be, I desired quiet. Liberty. Somewhere I could breathe without clipboard warriors knocking on my door regarding community standards. My ranch was literally on the border of Pine Hollow, a vast HOA-governed development with more rules than the state constitution. But my deed? It was beyond their grasp. No duas. No rules. No reportage to a president who craved control. The demarcation was definite, defined by the gate I constructed with my own hands, imposing cedar supported by iron hinges, haughty and stationary. At least, that is what I believed. I had not even been here 30 days when I encountered her. Karen, blonde bob, perfectly coiffed, oversized sunshades, new SUV, and a bumper sticker that said HOA strong. She eased up, rolled her window half down, and flashed me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Beautiful place," she said. "Thanks," I responded. Then, out of the blue, she floored the gas and drove right through my closed gate. The hinges creaked, the cedar rubbed against gravel, and by the time I'd even blinked, she was halfway across my pasture, dust billowing like smoke. I imagined she was lost at first, that maybe GPS had sent her off course. But the wave off in her mirror informed me otherwise. That wasn't an error, that was a message. That night, I fixed the gate, strengthened the hinges, dug the posts deeper. I assumed it was poor manners, that's all. But a week later, tires and broken wood came again. She didn't slow down this time. She bulldozed through as if she were storming Normandy. I dashed out from the porch, flailing my arms. "Hey, that's private property," I bellowed. She leaned out of the window, giggling. "Community easement," she hollered before speeding off down the drive. Community easement? My blood boiled. I knew my deed inside and out. There was no easement, no right-of-way, no loop to speak of. But Karen talked like it was holy law, straight from the book of HOA. That evening, at the feed store down the street, I mentioned it to them. 2 old-timers shook their heads. "You got Karen running through your property?" One of them asked, spitting sunflower seeds into a cup. "Got it," I said. "Good luck with that. She governs that HOA like it's her own kingdom." "People have been battling her for years," the other one added. "It's best to leave her alone. Otherwise, she'll suck you dry of money and complaints." I didn't appreciate that advice. Leave her alone? Leave her destroy my gate week after week? No way. Not on my property. Not in my lifetime. The third time around, I caught her in the act. I was stacking firewood near the barn when I heard the sound of gravel crunching. I hit the ground and rushed out. Her SUV sat in front of my gate. She met me dead on and grinned. "You really ought to. Leave this open," she said. "This is my gate. My property. You're trespassing." I snapped back. She cocked her head, lips twisting as if tasting something bitter. "Don't be selfish. This shortcut saves me 10 minutes in the morning. It's called community spirit." I chuckled, though nothing was amusing. "Lady, this is trespassing. You're harming my property." Her scowl turned cold. "You new here? Perhaps you don't get it. The HOA makes the rules around here. You're not exempt." That was the first time I ever heard her use HOA as a weapon, like she wore a crown made of bylaws and busybodies. I told her to turn around. She floored it, dust flying off my boots as she sped across my pasture. I repaired the gate again, But it wasn't about cedar and hinges anymore. It was about principle. Each splinter was an affront, and I wasn't going to let Karen get the better of me. Each dent was her laughing at me. The worst, of course, was that the other board members began to follow her example. I saw a motorcade of HOA cars driving across my property like it was their new shortcut a couple of times. They waved at one another, waved at me like I was merely the groundskeeper. One day, I discovered an envelope stuck in my mailbox. Official HOA letterhead, a violation notice. My heart dropped as I read it. Dear resident, you are out of compliance with HOA standards for having unsightly structures. The ranch gate at the entrance to your property does not meet community aesthetics. Please take it down immediately or be charged fines. I almost laughed myself ill. I was not even part of their HOA. My property was severed, deeded, and paid for in full. But there was black ink on white paper to demolish the very gate they continued ramming through. I drove down to the town clerk's office to double-check the records. Yes, sure enough, I was correct. No easements, no HOA control. My gate was mine. Nevertheless, that letter stung like a warning shot. Karen wasn't just some entitled driver. She was starting a war. And if there's one thing you learned building houses for 30 years, it's that every structure, every wall, every roof, every gate is only as strong as the man willing to stand behind it. Karen thought she could scare me with paperwork and SUVs. But I'd built more than gates in my life. I'd constructed foundations, and I was going to construct something that would put an end to her shortcuts forever. By the end of that first month, I knew my slice of tranquility had become a battlefield. Karen was not only using my gate, she was flaunting it. The more I rebelled, the braver she became. It began innocently. She cruised through every now and then, generally in the afternoons. Her SUV tires devoured my gravel dust clouds, blowing across my porch like a dust storm. But then she got bold. Afternoons, evenings, even late at night, I'd be out back giving food to my horses and catch the low rumble of her engine far away. Sure enough, headlights cut through the night, my gate creaking open like some toll booth she was not about to pay. One Sunday morning, I took matters into my own hands and blocked her route by parking my trusty Chevy pickup directly inside the gate. I thought if she was so desperate for a shortcut, she at least would have to confront me eye to eye. I sat on the tailgate, coffee in hand, waiting it out. Didn't take long. Dust on the horizon, then the familiar outline of her SUV speeding down the road. She slowed upon sighting me, then leaned out her window with that same self-satisfied smile. "You're wasting your time," she said. "This road is for everybody." "No, ma'am," I said calmly. "This road is for me. The deed states that." Her sunglasses flashed. "You can't own land that impedes community access. It's illegal." I almost choked on my coffee. Illegal. I looked up county records twice. She was bluffing, but she did it so convincingly you'd think she'd authored the law herself. "I think you should turn around," I said to her. Her smile spread. "And I think you should move your truck." We stood there looking at each other for what seemed like a whole minute. Lastly, she stormed, spun her SUV around in reverse, and shrieked away in a plume of gravel. I thought I'd succeeded for a second, but the next day I came back from town to discover my gate flat on the ground. Posts broken, hinges twisted into paperclip form. New tire tracks cut across my pasture. Karen had ramped it up, and now she wasn't alone. That week, I saw at least 2 other HOA members join her lead. A maroon minivan bearing a Pine Hollow HOA proud sticker and a silver sedan whose license plate frame read, "Board Treasurer." They drove over my property as if it was deed to them individually. It wasn't by chance. It was coordinated. Karen was making my land a shortcut for the entire HOA. I attempted reason again, however. For heaven's sake, why? One night, I strolled over to the HOA office, a brick structure that resembled a law office more than a neighborhood association. There, inside, she sat at a shiny desk piled high with binders. Karen glared up at me from behind her papers, her expression one of sheer contempt, as though I was some farmhand following dirt on her marble floors. "We need to speak," I stated firmly. "Oh, good," she said sweetly. "You're here regarding your fines." "My what?" She pushed a paper across the desk. It contained infractions against me, unauthorized structures, unkempt land failure to abide by HOA road easements. Every line had a dollar sign next to it, totaling almost $300 zero. "You're crazy," I said. "I'm not even in your HOA." Her tone hardened. "Don't play tricks. All of our properties here are included in our community charter." "That's a falsehood, and you're well aware of that," I barked. "The county clerk attested to it. I'm beyond your boundary lines." Karen relaxed in her chair, drumming her manicured nails on the armrest. "Boundaries bend when community well-being is on the line. Boundaries are lawful," I retorted, "and mine don't bend." Her lips compressed. "You'll be sorry about that obstinacy." That was when it hit me. We weren't just disagreeing. This was a war of attrition. She tracked me down, bugged me, menaced me, whatever it took to wear me down until I acquiesced. And she wasn't acting alone. A few days later, I was repairing fence posts when one of her board members, a thin man with a clipboard, strode up like he owned the place. "Sir, you can't continually rebuild this gate," he declared. "HOA has voted. The road remains open." I wiped the sweat from my brow. "Strange, I don't remember voting in your HOA since I'm not a member." He made some notation on his clipboard. "Disobedience will be followed by additional penalties." I chuckled, but there wasn't any humor to it. "You'll require more than a clipboard to intimidate me, buddy." He stomped away, grumbling, "Karen will take care of you." And take care of me, she did. One evening at midnight, I was startled awake by the thud of splintering wood. I took my flashlight and stormed out. There was again the gate destroyed, and in the distance, Karen's SUV tail lights fading into the darkness. This time, she didn't even bother to fake it. No excuses, no words, just sheer defiance. I stood among the dark fists, clenched, gazing at the wreckage. The cedar planks I'd cut through, the hinges I'd welded, all strewn about like matchsticks. My ranch no longer felt like mine. It felt breached. The next morning, I heard neighbors gossiping at the general store. "She's been cutting through his land again. Won't end well." But no one gets the better of Karen. She's got the sheriff on speed dial, the county clerk in her back pocket. That's when I knew I couldn't count on law or reason. Karen wasn't going to let up because she didn't think she had to. In her world, the HOA was above the law, and she was its queen. But me, I was not wired to roll over. Years of building had shown me that if a building kept falling down, you didn't fix it. You built it bigger and better. And sometimes you build it out of steel, not wood. As I picked up the splintered bits of my gate, a notion started forming. A threatening notion. What if the next time Karen attempted her little detour, she didn't only break wood? What if instead she ran full force into something she couldn't brush off? That evening, I sat on my porch gazing up at the stars, spinning it around in my head. Karen was playing a game of finding and noticing, she thought. But I was finished playing. I was going to lay a trap. And when she walked into it, she'd never forget. By this time, with each time I heard the deep rumble of an SUV engine, my heart raced. Karen had gotten to me in a way that few humans ever did. It was no longer a matter of a gate anymore. It was a matter of ownership, respect, and whether or not a man's property was actually his own when someone else believed they had a right to it. The next morning, after she broke the gate once more, I received yet another envelope in the mail. This one was not even covert. Notice of violation, ranch entrance blocks community traffic. Take down gate within 7 days or pay daily fines of $250. I held the porch letter, shaking in my hand. I wasn't even living in their HOA. But somehow they believed sending me fake fines would humble me. Later that afternoon, Karen herself strode onto my front porch, clipboard clutched in hand heels, tapping on my wooden stairs as if entering a courtroom she already controlled. "You've been warned," she stated, waving the document. "Remove this gate or the HOA will pursue legal action further." I rested against the door frame, arms folded. "Karen, this is not your property. This is not your street. You don't get to write rules here." She blushed. "I am the president of Pine Hollow HOA, and every street in this community," I interrupt her. "This isn't in your community. My deed indicates it." For an instant, I saw her hesitate. But Karen wasn't the kind to concede. She smoothed her blazer and thrust the paper into my chest. You're a self-absorbed man, she spat. You're keeping your neighbors out. This street is a public good. I couldn't help but chuckle. You mean it's a shortcut for your coffee runs in the morning? Don't try to spin it like some grand cause. Her eyes grew venomous. You'll live to regret this. And then she stormed off on her heel. The following week was a circus. HOA board members started inspecting my ranch. Clipboards showed up with men, uninvited, glancing over my fence like vultures. They took pictures of my barn, my livestock, even the bales of hay piled out back. I accosted one of them, a gaunt man with sunken eyes and a smirk, and he had the nerve to tell me, documenting infractions. Infractions of what I insisted. Community standards. I let out a laugh. This isn't your neighborhood. He didn't even respond, just wrote something on a piece of paper and drove off. That evening, I was sitting on my porch when I heard tires rolling over gravel once more. Karen's SUV headlights pierced the darkness. She didn't come in at the gate. She careened through what little repair I'd done. My dogs yelled, my horses startled. She flirted over my property, then vanished into the darkness. Something within me had changed. That was when annoyance hardened into determination. The breaking point arrived 3 nights later. Splintering wood is an awful wake-up alarm to hear, let alone before breakfast. The night I ran outside with shotguns across my shoulders more for show than anything else. Headlights sliced through darkness, and I reached the driveway with my gate destroyed once more. But Karen wasn't alone this time. 3 vehicles had smashed through, hers in the lead, 2 HOA board members bringing up the rear like accomplices. They hollered like teenagers breaking into a carnival, headlights darting across the pasture. I screamed until my throat was raw, but they continued on, making their point heard and clear. My property was theirs now. The next day, I went to the sheriff's station and explained to a deputy, chewing on a toothpick and shrugging. Without video, it's your word against theirs, he said. And Karen's got influence. She'll spin it as you hindering a community road. No support from the law. No salvation. I clutched the wheel so tightly my knuckles throbbed all the way home. If the law wasn't going to look out for me, then I would look out for myself. That night, hammering the final hinge into a makeshift gate, Karen arrived again and didn't even trouble with civilities. You're wasting your time, she said, opening her SUV door like she had every right to be parked in the driveway. We'll drive it through until that gate is no longer here. Perspiration dripped down my back, but I stood up to her. This property belongs to me. I will fight for it. Her smile sent a shiver. We're voting to take down your gate tomorrow, with or without your approval. She settled back in her vehicle, eyes narrowing. I let her leave, and something clicked. Perhaps doubt, perhaps curiosity. Either way, I had some work ahead of me. That evening I drew on scraps of paper. What wasn't working? Hinges weren't working. If I was going to get an answer that couldn't be bullied aside with horsepower and privilege, I needed to think outside the box, something that would stop her, and stop her for good. Not petty, not illegal, successful. The concept solidified in my mind. This was no longer a gate. This was a statement, a trap, not to harm, but to stop, to make the pride of driving over someone's land expensive in pride and inconvenience. I woke up at dawn with a clarity I had not experienced in weeks. Karen and her group believed they had me cornered. They'd forgotten what I'd been for 3 decades, a builder. I'd built houses from the ground, repaired mildewed beams, laid foundations that survived storms. If I could build a house that could survive a hurricane, I could build a barrier that would finally halt a wrecked SUV. I began with steel salvage from an old demolition site, beams that had been sitting in the dust behind the barn. I traded thin posts for heavy supports buried deep and anchored in cement, cross-braced with welds and reinforced at an angle, so the frame acted more like a small fortress than a ranch gate. From the highway, it still looked like cedar and tradition, rustic, familiar, but close up it was different, a center made to withstand and last. Bringing Karen's SUV to a halt wasn't the aim. I longed to conclude the shortcut once and for all, not in blood or ill will, but with a penalty that would cause even the most rational individual to pause and reflect. So I concealed defensive devices just past the gate, out of sight to casual observation, but waiting to exact retribution on rash driving in the form of vehicle sabotaging results. The concept was crude, but exacting in execution. All measurements twice taken, all welds double-checked, all seemed stress-tested. I labored by lamplight, perspiration dripping in channels, my dogs resting at my side like sentinels of my work. News of my midnight toil found its way back into town. Neighbors crept as they went by on the highway, curiosity flickering in their gazes. One stopped and asked, "You fixing the gate again?" I smiled. "Not fixing," I replied. "Upgrading." Folks around here learned not to intrude in another man's war. But naturally, word got to Karen fast. She showed up the following afternoon with rage in her stride. Not the smirk now, but something more pointed. "You think you can intimidate me with equipment?" she spat, patrolling the new fence like a predator around a threat. I let her get her words out, then pointed out what any sane person could see. This was my property boundary, my right to secure it, and her repeated destruction of my gate amounted to trespass and property damage. She scoffed. "We'll take this to the board. You'll be sorry." That night, she mobilized the usual suspects. Trucks idled near the road. Phones hummed. The next-door gossip full of her angry messages about aggression and war on community standards. I stood on the porch, making myself a coffee and enjoying the old tradesman's habit of muscle memory, measure, adjust, hold fast. 3 nights later, engines growled and taillights burst in the distance. Karen led the charge, sure, bold, but this time the gate did what it was designed to do. Her SUV slammed into a barrier that didn't shudder, didn't yield. "Tiris spoon." Someone cursed. The rest of the convoy hesitated, embarrassed by the failure and afraid of the risk. They backed off like wolves given a sharper tooth. The sound of manhood, wounded by a piece of metal, looked ridiculous in the headlights. Karen stomped out, face unreadable, and pointed. "You'll pay for this." She stormed, but the neighbors who had previously ridiculed my obstinacy now observed in another context. The next day, I discovered the board had held an angry meeting. Karen's melodrama had lost her whatever moral capital she'd retained. Some of her supporters confessed in private they'd reached their limit of being held hostage to one individual's temper. The sheriff's department, having once shrugged, eventually took statements seriously. A pattern of harassment, several incidents, and witnesses made it impossible to ignore. My security doorbell recording, the testimonies of my neighbors, and the visible evidence of incessant damage turned the tide. There were months of lawyering, mediation, and high-tension community meetings afterward. But the script was different. I wasn't presented as a vigilante. I was the owner of the property who had exercised his rights to protect what was his. Karen's bullying, previously veiled as civic responsibility, now appeared to be petty tyranny. The board voted to strip her of enforcement authority. She lost allies faster than she could threaten them with fines. Slowly, the street returned to something like normal. At night on the porch, I look at that new gate and feel something like peace. Not because I'd won in some dramatic cinematic sense, but because I'd stopped being a passive target. I'd used skill, patience, and a builder's instinct to protect what I'd earned. People started to bring over tables for block parties again. The feed store old-timers nodded when they saw me on the road. Life resumed its calm rhythm, cattle grazing at dawn, the gate closing with a solid, unquestioned thud. And Karen? She learned, the hard way, that entitlement only goes so far. Her SUV sat parked more times than not. Her threats dissipated. The neighborhood adjusted to its equilibrium without one individual's iron hand. Some battles require attorneys. Others require a firm hand and a strong-built solution. In mine, building was the solution. I never wished to go to violence. I wished for boundaries, clear, respected, and enforced. The gate accomplished that. It nipped back not in anger, but in effect. It asserted a lesson louder than 1,000 grievances. 3 days into my work, I found her SUV parked just at the property line, engine running. She glared at me behind tinted glass, cell phone in hand, probably recording. I continued laboring, hammer clang against steel, unheeding of her scowl. At last, she lowered her window. You actually believe you can halt progress? She laughed. I didn't even glance up. No, but I can halt you. Her laugh was high-pitched, brittle. Well, see, tomorrow is the board meeting. We're suing for an injunction. Good luck, I grumbled, sparks flying as I welded another seam. She left tires, spitting gravel in. Anger. That evening, my friend Hank visited. Old rancher, face creased like worn leather hands, calloused from years of fence repair. He leaned on the post, observing me work. You're playing with fire. You know that. He said, I know. She's got the sheriff on speed dial. She'll yell harassment the second this backfires. Then I'll see that it doesn't backfire. He regarded me for a long moment, then laughed. Hell, I like your style. Could use an extra pair of hands. We worked together to complete the final reinforcements, securing bolts, stress-testing welds, double-checking alignments. When we finally took a step back, dripping with sweat and drained, the gate proudly rose up, deceptively plain on the exterior, inalterable on the inside. Looks just like the original, Hank declared. But it ain't, is it? I nodded my head. Not even close. By the 5th day, the trap was finished. The gate opened smoothly on heavy-duty hinges, clicking into steel brackets, sunk deep into the concrete. The trenches were filled perfectly with gravel. The spikes unless you knew where to look. Even the posts were painted to blend in with the old cedar perfect for the ranch look. To the naked eye, it appeared to be the same weak barrier Karen had smashed a dozen times. But to me, it seemed like justice. That night, as the sun fell low and colored the sky gold crimson, I sat on my porch gazing at the finished work. My hands were bruised, my back was ache-lead, but my heart was level. For weeks, Karen had made me out to be a pushover, some isolated rancher she could intimidate. She believed fines, threats, and SUVs rendered her invincible. But she'd forgotten the oldest law in the book. All bullies sooner or later run up against a wall that they can't demolish. And tomorrow, when she came storming through once more, she'd discover how hard that wall could retaliate. I sat back in my chair, dogs at my feet, and breathed a soft challenge into the quiet evening air. Come on, Karen. I'm waiting. The trap was set. All that was left for me to do was wait. And if I'd learned one thing about Karen, it was that patience wasn't one of her strengths. She couldn't resist showing off. She had to win, had to be the dominant one. Someday, sooner or later, she'd crash over my property once again. It didn't take long. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, the sound arrived. The low, raspy rumble of her SUV coming down the road, steadily louder and louder until the gravel shook beneath her wheels. I set my coffee cup on the rail of the porch, leaned back in my chair, and watched. There she was, hair perfect, sunglasses huge, jaw set with that supercilious determination I'd grown all too familiar with. 2 other cars followed behind her, the maroon minivan of the HOA treasurer and a sedan belonging to another board member, a procession of arrogance. Karen did not slow up, not at all. She stamped the gas harder, accelerating as if the mere action of crashing through my gate empowered her. I braced myself as her SUV approached. Then it occurred. The instant her front bumper struck the gate, would not move. Rather than splintering like previously, it remained firm, planted into its steel center. The noise was gunmetal on metal, the ring of irreversibility. Her SUV bucked hard. The front frame buckled with a gut-wrenching groan. Airbags deployed, white smoke billowing from the windows. Tires screamed on gravel as momentum swept her another foot before the girded steel caught her like a flying amber. And then there were spikes. When her rear tires slid over the disguised trench, the steel teeth sank deep, tearing rubber asunder with a report that made me wheeze even from a porch. Pop, pop, pop. In a split second, her SUV dipped forward on torn wheels, hissing like a dying beast. The following convoy skidded to a stop too late to prevent it. The minivan skidded into the ditch, fishtailing before sputtering to a stop. The sedan slammed hard horn shrieking, barely staying from piling onto her bumper. Dust hung over the area, lingering in the summer air like smoke after a firefight. For what seemed like an eternity, it was quiet. And then the screaming started. Karen burst out her door, stumbling out in a puff of airbag powder. She coughed hard, wide-eyed and raging. What have you done? She screamed at me as if I just committed genocide. I remained sitting on the porch, steady as a Sunday morning preacher. My dogs yapped at her, but remained at my side, tail rigid with tension. "What I've done," I said back, "is prevent you from trespassing." Her voice broke into a high shriek. "This is against the law. You've endangered Liv." I rose slowly, went down the stairs, and went toward the wreck. The nearer I approached, the more distinct was the view. Her SUV's bumper wrenched like a crumpled soda can, airbags spewing fluids spilling onto the gravel. It was a disaster. But me, I grinned. "You were warned," I repeated calmly. "Time and time again. You decided this." She stamped her heel on the ground, shaking with fury. "You're finished. The HOA will ruin you with lawsuits." I raised an eyebrow. "On what basis?" "You trespassed through a private gate on private property without authorization. That's trespassing. And fortunate for me, I checked my pocket, pulling out a small gadget. I had installed cameras this time. I indicated toward the posts. Indeed, small security cams were discreetly mounted at angles, flashing red recording lights. Her complexion paled under the dust and makeup. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "I would," I answered. Neighbors now stood on the main road, attracted by the commotion. Phones were out, videoing each moment. Scurries of laughter coursed through the crowd when they spotted Karen standing by her disabled SUV, flushed and stuttering. "Looks like the Queen's lost her crown," one fellow grumbled loudly enough for all to hear. Laughter ensued. The HOA treasurer got out of the minivan, hopping a little, his clipboard still in his hand like a shield. He attempted to speak, but the crowd drowned him out with derisive laughter. The sedan driver didn't even exit the vehicle, just sat there, face hidden in his palms. Karen turned around, scowling at the neighbors. "Stop laughing. This is a serious infraction." But the louder she screamed, the harder people laughed. The image of Pine Hollow's would-be ruler, stranded, humiliated, and helpless, was too much for them to withstand. And me, I just stood there, arms folded, drinking it all in. The sheriff finally came, lights blinding. He got out, eyeing the sight with furrowed brows. "What in the blazes is going on here?" he said. Karen came running to him like a child to a father. "He laid a trap. He sabotaged the road. He might have killed us." The sheriff looked at me. "That true?" I nodded my head. "This is not a public road. It's my private property. She's been trespassing for weeks. I reinforced my gate and had cameras installed. You'll find everything you need on the tapes." Karen Yaff fell. "You can't." "Ma'am," the sheriff cut in voice. "Sleek, you've been warned before for pushing limits. If these cameras demonstrate what he claims they do, you're the one who's going to be in trouble." The crowd erupted in cheers. Phones aloft. Karen's face turned red eyes, scanning from me to the sheriff to the neighbors, capturing her downfall. For once, she was without words. I approached her SUV and rapped the hood, saying loud enough for all to hear. Shortcuts shut Karen down. The crowd let out in laughter whistles ringing down the road. Karen put her face in her hands, shrieking muffled oaths before she backed away from her destroyed SUV. The sheriff shook his head. "We'll be in touch, but it looks like you're in the clear." I nodded, as the tow trucks came to haul away her parade of shame. And as the dust settled again over Pine Hollow, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Peace. Because Karen had learned the hard way that not all gates can be broken. Some gates fight back. If there's one thing I learned from the whole ordeal, it's that Karen never conceded defeat. With her SUV, or crumpled her tires and shredded, and half the block laughing at her, she wasn't done. No humiliation, just made her more risky. The very next morning, I woke up to see another envelope in my mailbox. It was thicker, heavier. On the inside, a pile of papers stamped with seals looking official. At the top, notice of legal action. As per the document, I was being sued by the HOA for reckless endangerment, damage to property, and willful obstruction of community easement. They insisted that I not only permanently remove my gate, but also compensate Karen and her fellow board members for emotional distress. The icing on the cake, pay for her SUV's repair. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my coffee. Nevertheless, the nerve of it enraged me. "Here," I was a victim of trespassing and property damage for 6 months, and I was somehow being portrayed as a criminal. I didn't lose time. I drove directly into town to consult an attorney, a keen female named Martha, who'd been practicing property law longer than Karen had been bothering people. She flipped through the documents, shook her head, and smiled. "Typical HOA overreach," she said. "They have no authority on your property, and they know it, but they're hoping that you'll crack under pressure." "Well, cracking isn't in my dictionary," I told her. She laughed. "Good, because this is going to be entertaining." Martha filed a counter lawsuit within a week. Trespassing, private property vandalism, harassment, and attempted fraud through bogus fines. And all thanks to my cameras, we had it all on tape. Karen crashing through the gate, HOA members tailgating her, and what happened after their little joyride. When Karen realized I was not going to back down, she went for broke. 2 days after, I returned home and found a number of board members outside my gate with clipboards yelling loudly enough for the entire street to hear. "This guy is dangerous," one yelled. "He baited a trap that might have killed kids. Unsafe structures, violatins, all over," another chimed in. Karen herself was at the forefront, waving papers like a commander rallying her troops. "We can't let one obstinate man put our community at risk. He'll pay for what he's done," neighbors assembled. But this time, the crowd did not rally to her cause. They grumbled among themselves, some nodding their heads, others taping with their phones. The tide was shifting. I walked out onto my porch, arms folded, and yelled at the top of my lungs. "You all desire the truth. View the tape. Each and every time she bullies her way through that gate, each and every one of those phony fines, each and every trespass, it's all caught on camera." Then I gestured to the crowd. "You've all witnessed it with your own eyes. This isn't safety. This is control." Murmurs became shouts. A voice cried out, "We're sick of the HOA bullying us." Another chimed in, "You tell him, neighbor." Karen's face paled under her makeup, but she stood firm, screaming, "Lies, all lies." But the horse had already bolted. The fissures in her kingdom were beginning to open up. The court hearing was where it all really fell apart. Karen swept in wearing a bright red suit, bristling with a pile of binders, her board members following behind her like scared ducklings. She walked into the courtroom like she owned the place, grinning to the onlookers like a politician on the stump. When the judge called the case, Karen's attorney began a grandiose monologue about how I'd put the safety of the community at risk with my booby-trapped gate. They made me out to be some crazy recluse fixated on protecting imaginary property rights. Then Martha stood cool, clinical, lethal. "Your Honor," she started, "the facts will demonstrate that the property of my client is not within the jurisdiction of HOA. These fines and accusations are bogus. And as far as endangerment, the only peril was a result of the blatant trespassing by the HOA president and her team." She flipped the remote, and all screens in the courtroom went bright. The tape rolled, Karen's SUV crashing into the gate, tires blowing on the spikes, neighbors giggling in the background. And then clip after clip, all the wild drive-thrus, all the smug smirks, all the bellowed threats about community rights. By the final clip, the courtroom hummed like a hive. The judge even raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by her circus. When Karen testified, the breakdown came quickly. "I'm the president," she screamed, gesturing towards me. "He can't disobey me. He can't disobey the HOA." The judge's gavel came crashing down. "This is a court of law, not your board meeting. Sit down." Her credibility destroyed in an instant. The decision came quick and fierce. The HOA's accusations dismissed, the board instructed to pay damages for trespassing and property damage. Karen personally fined for harassment and reckless driving. And the cherry on top? All of that video came in a public record, available for anyone to ask for and leak, which it did. In a week, Karen's SUV versus my gate was viral. Social media went wild. Memes galore. HOA Karen versus the gate of justice. One clip had her shocked face freeze mid-impact, bold letters stating, "You shall not pass." The internet went wild. At home in Pine Hollow, the aftermath was catastrophic. Neighborhoods finally called out. Tales spilled out, false fines, threats, intimidation. The board members resigned one by one, not want to go down with her. By the end of the month, the HOA's reputation was in tatters, its coffers depleted by her zeal. Karen was isolated, her power diminished, her influence shattered. And me? I sat on my porch at dusk, coffee cup in hand, watching the light dance off my impenetrable gate. Victory had never been sweeter, but peace in Pine Hollow came with an asterisk. I recognized types like Karen. Silence wasn't surrender, it was regrouping. Weeks went by nonetheless, and the most I caught of her was a flash of blonde hair disappearing through her front door, dodging every neighbor's glance. The former untouchable HOA queen was now a hushed warning tale. I almost believed she'd learned her lesson, until a certified letter came through the mail. From Karen, a settlement offer. Remove the gate, permit limited passage, and she'd throw it all in, dressed up in proper phrases about moving forward and healing divisions. I burst out laughing. Healing divisions? No, she was fighting for control. So I typed her a one-page response. There is no community easement. I own the road, deed attached. Here's the twist. While Karen screamed about community property, I dug through county records. Not only was my ranch outside HOA jurisdiction, but the road she worshipped, the shortcut she swore belonged to Pine Hollow, it was mine. Bought, paid for, deeded in full. Karen and her board hadn't just harassed me. They'd been trespassing on my private road. When she read my response, the explosion came fast. She burst onto my land, the letter flailing like a white-hot brand. "This is fraud," she screamed. "You can't claim that road. It's for everybody." I rested against the rail of my porch, arms crossed. "Look at the records, Karen. County clerk's office. The deed's in my name. It always has been." Her face contorted, shock streaming into her eyes. She spluttered like an engine out of fuel. That's impossible." "No," I replied, serene and firm. "What's impossible is you ever putting a foot on this road again. You're trespassed." Neighbors had convened, phones rolling, cameras recording. When Karen realized she was outnumbered, out-recorded, and out of juice, something inside her snapped. With a stifled scream, she jammed her heel into the ground and stormed off for the final time. From that point on, Karen never set foot on my gate again. The HOA, without its tyrant, limped along in the background, its members suddenly more interested in lawn mowers than lawsuits. My ranch became the sanctuary I'd envisioned. The gate stood tall, not only as protection, but as proof. Proof that I didn't need to stoop to her level of lies and intimidation. Proof that the truth, when you stand on it, is indestructible. Justice sometimes doesn't arrive with sirens and handcuffs. It sometimes arrives in the form of a gate that won't fall, no matter how many times conceit attempts to break it down. And that was the most beautiful triumph of all. In retrospect, I understand this was never just about a gate, or an SUV, or a Karen. It was about boundaries and the strength to stand up for them. There will always be Karens in life. Individuals who believe rules don't apply to them. Who push your patience, desecrate your peace, and prod you until you break. Or you build. I chose to build, and that is what I leave you with. Your gate may not be steel and wood. Perhaps it's your time, your energy, your dignity, or your peace of mind. But whatever it is, guard it. Strengthen it. Don't let somebody destroy it just because they believe they can. Because respect isn't bestowed. It's earned. And sometimes it needs to be demanded. So I'll pose a question to you. What's the gate in your life that you must guard? Drop it in the comments. And if you like this tale, hit subscribe, because let me tell you, there's a whole lot more HOA wars, Karen moments, and stories of sweet, sweet vengeance in store for you.